Thank you so much, Ujjwala. All right, so good afternoon, everybody. And I'm really, really happy to be moderating this session. And today we will start our panel discussion with the first question to Geetha. Geetha, what are some of the key drivers that help women navigate organizational and other obstacles to move up career rungs at a leadership level? Could you also share some of your own experiences on what worked for you?
Sure. Thank you, Rajita. First of all, I'm very grateful to Jobs for her for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this panel with amazing and highly accomplished women. From my personal experience, I think there are a few drivers that I can talk about. Let me start by saying that, like many other women, I've had some personal circumstances, where I've had to balance my career priorities with that of being a caregiver, to a close family member who's been suffering from both mental health issues and physical disability, hearing impairment for many years now. And typically, because of that challenge, I had often stifled my ambitions of, wanting to move up the ladder, raising my hand for those opportunities that came my way, because I always had this doubt, whether I would be able to do justice, whether I would be able to actually shine in the role, would I have to compromise on the time that I have to spend at home? So it's that level of, not being sure of whether I can do that. The first thing I think we should do in those circumstances is to speak out and ask for help and support, which I think I did a little later in my career. I realized that there are people willing to help, whether it's your own family members or whether it's your colleagues at work or your managers. You will always find people that have your back. And in my case, yes, I realized that, my family, my colleagues, my managers have all played a role in helping me in multiple stages in my careers. The second thing I want to mention is self doubt. And I think this was mentioned in a couple of earlier sessions today. We as women tend to have self doubt and we aim to tick all the boxes. Out of 10, we want to tick all 10. Whereas when it comes to men, they're actually quite happy and they see themselves as capable when they tick even 5. So I think the first thing is for us to not be hard on ourselves. We've got to, really take the chances, not have self doubt, and realize our potential. So I went through the same thing when I moved from a finance leadership role to leading a business of engineers. I had self doubt. Would I be able to actually do justice to the role? I'm not coming from an engineering background. Would I be accepted? What happens if I don't succeed? So all of these things came in my mind. And I did a few things. Firstly, I really tried to understand what are the expectations of the role. And I realized it was more around stakeholder management and understanding the business, which I had, as competencies, in my case. And secondly, I also realized that, when you're transparent about, what you are as a person, what you are as an individual, and you seek support from your own colleagues, they're more than willing to help you succeed. So I think it's about, moving away from the point of self-doubt and then not being ashamed to learn and reskill yourselves if it's required. And this, I think, is it's a little harder for women because there are not still too many role models out there. We all know that, there are only probably about maybe about 3 or 4% of women in boardrooms in India. So you don't have like 16% of women still in boardrooms, whereas working women as a proportion is probably in the range of about 15-16%. But at senior levels, you see very less percentage. So I think that's why all of this comes together: self-doubt and not being able to actually ask out for support, not being able to really put forth or raise your hand to say I can do it. The third thing is not being ashamed to fail, because again, we as women want to be perfect in everything we do, and we should not, try and push ourselves that hard. After all, nobody is perfect. So in my case, I realized this, over the years, that I should be prepared to learn, fall down, learn, pick myself up, and move on. So these are some of the drivers I think that help me. But I think fundamentally for me, it all starts at home. How do we sensitize men at home, whether it's our husbands or our brothers or our sons, whoever it is, to say that women have a lot of potential and we need to create that enabling environment both at home and at work. So those are my views, and I would now hand back to you, Shachita.
So thank you very much, Geetha, for this very, very inspirational story of what led you to where you are today. My second question to you, continuing from what we spoke about just now, is what do you think? Do you think personal branding is something which helps women? Do you think it's something that helps women stay relevant and visible in the organization? Do you think that has a role to play at all?
Yes, great question, Rajita. I absolutely believe personal branding is key for men and women, but particularly for women, for the reasons we've discussed at length today. And we tend to hide our abilities under a bushel most of the times. So, in my own case, I've seen this, but also in the case of some exemplary women who, through their personal branding, have reached great heights. So, I think branding is something we need to work on both inside our organization as well as outside in the external world. And nowadays, there are multiple avenues. Social media channels give you multiple opportunities to express yourselves and your thoughts, be it in terms of your successes or achievements, or be it in terms of your life experiences, or be it in terms of contributing articles, sharing your knowledge with people. So there are multiple channels today, and I think we should take advantage of that. And also, apart from LinkedIn as a very prominent platform that we all most of us use, there are other avenues as well. So in my case, I came across Thinkers 360 as a very powerful, again, platform where thought leaders are celebrated. And quite often, I think unless we look around us and search for those opportunities to see how we can brand ourselves, we tend to limit our thinking. So again, platforms like Thinkers 360 is something I've seen people using, and I use myself. And by actually using that to expose to the world what my ideas are, what my thought leadership is on certain topics, like be it digital transformation or digital twins or whatever it is, I realized I was able to get that visibility and profile sort of upgrade to say that I'm a top 25 thought leader in this space, and so on and so forth. And also, increasingly, I think today we are in an era where there are humongous opportunities for us to really, contest in, so let's say, some awards, nominate ourselves for awards. And I think there's so much awareness on inclusion and diversity, and we should not shy away and from, putting forth our nomination and raising our hands, because all of these give us not just a visibility, in terms of building our branding and profile, but to me, it also inspires others. In my own case, I get inspired by others who do this brilliantly. For example, not just women, but also Sumit Agarwal, someone who's
Yeah.
named as a top, LinkedIn voice. Despite his disability, is doing a brilliant job by sharing, some of his ideas, his thoughts, and his branding, the way he's building his brand. Again, another lady, Brigitte Hyacinth. Again, she's a top LinkedIn voice and influencer. I mean, these are people who have been role models in being able to build their branding and profile, and externally, but also internally we can do that. And Varsha, I think, spoke about it. You can not be shy of asking questions. You cannot be shy of presenting a contrarian view. I think we should really take advantage of these opportunities today, and really, get rid of whatever has been holding us back in the past. So that's just my take on that,
Right.
Shashika. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Geeta. I think that was very insightful, and thank you for sharing some great tips and you know uh, from real life examples that you have used yourself and seen others use. Well, my next question is to Rajita. So, Rajita, an HBR paper mentions research on the fact that women often get caught on what is called the likability conundrum. Would you like to comment on this? And further on, how do they get to the point where they're regarded as leaders who are empathetic and resilient, but at the same time capable of taking tough decisions?
Thanks, Sujita, for that. I think what I want to do is you spoke of the likability conundrum, right? I want to start off with John Bon Jovi's song. I don't know how many of you have heard, so I'll read out the lyrics for you, okay? It goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Ah, is it just me, or does anybody see? The new improved tomorrow isn't what it used to be. Yesterday keeps coming around. It's just reality. The reason I want to call this out is, likability is not necessarily just about, women having that conundrum, but I think it's a human tendency. And when people talk of personal brand and they talk of how it's going to work out for them, the There's an author called Ryan, and he's written a book on storytelling and how do you tell your story. As part of that, the question he asks you is, do you have a personal brand or do you have a reputation? So most of the time we get into this kind of a syndrome or conundrum is because you believe that the more, and it's people will know you, people will like you, then they will trust you. That's how it typically happens. Women like to be trusted by nature or the way we've been born. And that also, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think the way everybody's been doing it over the years has changed. And now we're going back to the same circle as to what used to happen 100, 200 years back. We're going back to the way of living like that. So I don't see a reason why it's a problem. I think everybody does it. But it's just that women get highlighted for obvious reasons, right? So this is one of the reasons. The second, coming very straight to the question on why can't women take tough decisions? I don't agree with that at all. What I have seen in my career, I have seen women take the toughest of decisions, and I'm not generalizing it, but I have seen men like to fester or let the problem fester and let it go on its own. So you don't make any decision on anything, and after 2 months from now, when the issue was boiling at that time, you're like, what the heck? The issue's gone. Let's ignore it. This has happened on maybe disciplinary issues, performance issues, or anything related to what would I like to client interactions, etc. It's just like you just let it be and then it'll go. I think women are very quick. The reason I think women are very quick is because of the instinct that's there, that I know my gut, this is the right thing to do and I'm going to do it. The amount of conviction that comes in decision making on those things is super fast. But when you look at an organizational setup, and you come in and you ask women to say, would you apply for this job? Like I think Geetha already alluded, I would think 10 times, whereas a man, even if he has 5% of those qualities, he'll say, let's go for it. Yeah, we'll figure. So I think that we'll figure, the ecosystem is there and I can handle it, is, what needs to come back. And I'll give you an example of my grandmother. My nanny, she was born in Pakistan before the, what do I want to say, partition. And in those days, she was trained how to horse ride. She was taught how to swim. And she was a girl. At that time, it was very important to have a boy because, her dad was a jagidar or, owning villages or whatever you want to call it. So with that kind of a thing, I think we're finally getting back to that. And it's about decision making. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it this way. So my nanny has made so many decisions. She was not in the corporate world, but she has essentially, impacted and influenced everybody in such a great way that I think everybody should just go ahead and try it.
Right. I think that's a very beautiful story, and thank you so much for sharing that. And you did bring up imposter syndrome, so thank you so much. I think that is very, very insightful for everybody who's listening to us today. My next question is to Sonali. How do we maintain and build talent pipeline for women leaders within organizations? What kind of enabling mechanisms do you think are needed to make this happen?
Thank you, Suchita. That's a very interesting question, and I think a question most of the leaders on the top of their mind. Let me just start with some statistics there. Yeah, the labor force participation in India for women is 26%. Yeah. The second data point that I want to bring, and I'm going to be alluding to the talent pipeline conversation subsequently, is that women hold only 25% of the entry-level positions. And of those 25%, 5 to 7% is the leadership positions that they manage. Now, this is a classic problem statement that we're having, right? Leaking pipeline we're talking about. And it certainly calls for a solution on how do you maintain, sustain the talent pipeline where you're able to elevate the women talent, considering the circumstances, the cultural nuances, the context and the situation, etc. For me, if I had to really look at maintaining, sustaining, and increasing the talent pipeline, I would look at basically three aspects. One is, of course, battling the biases, That's culture building. The entire inclusion space, well, we have spoken a lot about it, but I don't see really a great movement happening there. We're still stuck in the diversity. That is always going to be then a challenge for us to sustain the talent pipeline, is something which we really need to take care of. The culture building aspect, which has to start from the organizations. Yeah. The second piece I'm going to talk about is policies. Yeah. What kind of policies does your organization promote and talk about? I'll also come to an example there. And the third piece is on the development, right? When you have a talent available, when you really look at the women talent in the organization, what kind of career development opportunities are you supporting them with? What kind of confidence building initiatives are happening which are helping them progress their career? That's these are three essential areas that I look at. A quick example on the culture building, right? We're talking about battling biases, the different kind of biases which exist, starting from hiring internally as well. We're talking about internal talent pool. So when women employees apply for career positions at a level above, do you see a challenge with the biases of hiring them? Will she be able to do it? Should I give her that opportunity? Has she proven her past? Has she really done those kind of stretch assignments, right? Or why don't you just try to give her an opportunity, let her prove yourself? I think that's a classical difference there. And also talking about inclusion, how do you create a mindset where we make it possible for the hiring decisions to be more included? That's one. And the policies we're talking about, the career development policies I like to focus on here now. Are we trying to promote those kind of opportunities like the 3 E's, but we talk about the education, experience, exposure? Are we promoting this and ensuring there's an equal participation of men and women there so that the women also get that equity of opportunities there? I think that's the second piece. Third piece, largely the leaking pipeline around the leadership is why, because that's around the age group. And I'm assuming here, prone with some kind of research, is when the women have kids which are in the space of teenagers, or the crucial age of career, right? What kind of practices and policies does your organization really promote that point of time to allow women to balance their work and life? Right? I was talking about flexi working policies, looking at basically a work-life balance, allowing women to pursue their career opportunities remotely. So quite a few things which really gets comprised. So for me, all these three together, if they are successful, if the organization really consciously invest in these three, we will be able to move the talent pipeline from 5 to 7% to easily 15%.
Right. Thank you so much, Sonali. I think that was a very nice step-by-step, elucidation of, what one could do in an organization to make sure that your talent pipeline gains traction. You did mention unconscious bias a little while ago, and the biases which creep into various people processes. So my next question takes me to Arti. So Arti, could you talk about some of the ways in which you have seen women, or maybe you yourself, dealing with unconscious biases, at the workplace? They could be, as Sonali mentioned a little while earlier, it could be just questioning whether someone can really do a job just because they have a family and they have kids, maternal bias, which is a trap like a lot of women fall into. So what could you share some of your personal experiences with biases?
Sure. I think this is a very, very broad subject. Unconscious bias we see from our day-to-day life. It starts from home, even today, if we look at it, when a male child goes to the kitchen, he makes a cup of tea for you and you are like, flabbergasted, and you start praising that child. But the same thing, if a girl child does it, I see that in quite many houses. It's just an expectation, yeah, she's the one who has to do it. So there's no word of praise, or there's no word of appreciation. So I would say it starts from there. There are a lot of examples where we are, on a daily basis we encounter these biases. Another big example as a parent is like when you go to your PTAs, and when you ask about, okay, give me the feedback about my child, the very first thing which comes is, what marks has he got it? So everything is rolled around the marks. That is unconscious bias which we are introducing to. But I think these are the lot of things which I am realizing now. But my first introduction to unconscious bias was when after my second child was born and I went back to work. I had a wonderful boss, I must say that, right? And it was a performance review time. And when he called me, okay, come, we need to do the performance review of our employees. And as standard, I started by the name and this person XYZ, and this is how we should do the performance for him. So he told me, look, I'll give you one tip. And the tip is that remove the name. Just think about that person. Start thinking about his whole year, right? What he has performed. Don't think about the recent incidents you have, and then rate that person. So I guess that was my introduction to unbiased, unconscious biases which we have. And I realized, this unconsciously, we do it every day, not only during the performance reviews, but performance reviews, it happens most often, but we do it every day. And then that was the day when I started realizing there are unconscious bias which appears in our day-to-day life. If I take my story back, I come from a place where I belong to Jammu Kashmir, and I went to Chennai for my studies. And everybody used to tell my parents, you sent a girl child to the study? Why? She has to get married. Those were the questions which were being asked to her. But fortunately, my parents had been working all through. My mom was a principal, so they did not handle those questions very nicely, right? So when I got married, the very first question, you can't laugh in the forums, or you have to come inside or do your daily chores, etc. So those were the things when I started realizing this appears in the society. How we can help it? I think the very first thing what I started doing was started identifying these are the unconscious biases which appear in me. Bring it to the surface, make it to the conscious mind. Train your mind to deal with that unconscious bias, deal with that bias. Many times we have the bias, I used to realize there was a girl who was working with me and she was pregnant. And in the beginning, I realized I used to give her a lot of work. Then I realized, no, she's pregnant. I need to take care of her along with myself, along with her work and her health as well. So I think that's how you have to very important is identify what you have as a bias, because that is the first step, and your 50% of the solutions are 50% of the problem is solved. Bring it to your conscious mind and train your mind to deal with it. These are the 3 steps I would say one has to do it. As everybody said in the beginning, that hiring, when we have a CV from a male candidate and a female candidate, the first thing we see is her age. Is she going to be in an age where she has to conceive and give birth to the children? Maybe she'll be dropped out from the office hours for 6 months or 8 months or something. So those are the things which start coming to our mind immediately. So I think we have to start identifying all those things and bring it to the forums, various forums of the company. Is it a hiring forum or performance forums, or where we are participating, and tell people that we have to deal with all this. So that was my interaction with the unbiased, I would say.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Arti. And I think some very, very practicable examples there. Our next question to you, and Geetha, you may, if we would request you weigh in on that too as well. What do you think is the role of allyship and sponsorship in the organization? Because Arti, I heard you mention you had a boss who was very understanding and all of that. So he was obviously an ally, someone who understood, and guided you through your career journey. So would you like to talk a little more about, what is the role of allies that we create in the workplace, and sponsorship for women? Is that in any way a factor that would probably help their rise to the top?
It definitely does. So there is kind of a slight difference between allyship and a sponsorship. Let me talk about allyship first. Allyship is primarily, one engages, one understands you, one understands what your talents are, and advocates you in the various forums, not only for promotions, for your brands as well. Say for example, if we are in a meeting or something, and if a bias is appearing at that time, so he's the person who can challenge, who can support you at those times. For example, when I had when I went back after my maternity period, I always used to feel, it's a 7-month break, am I going to go back? But it was this boss of mine who said, don't worry, this happens, you're a brave girl, come back. So not only he did that, that was a mentorship to me, but along with me, he also made other male colleagues understand what I might be going through. And he started appreciating the efforts, the amount of extra effort as a girl I have to put in, because I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I have to handle the household, and I am giving 100% to my job as well. So he started, promoting all these ideas in the meetings and the forums, which really helped me grow my self-confidence as well. Once you have your self-confidence, and I think no one can stop you. But allyship is very, very important as a person and as a brand as well. If we talk about sponsorship, so what I think is the sponsorship is more to take ownership of that person and allow that person to grow and grow in the organization. So for that, I think there are women networks which are there in the companies. Those are the sponsorship programs which go. There are a lot of other sponsorship programs. For example, our company has just started a program called Jacob's Returnship Program. So that is a sponsorship program if you are taking a break, not only during your maternity, but probably over a period of years. So we are welcoming the women back to the workforce. In India, we are a couple of months away to launch, but in Asia, we have already launched, and we have seen a huge success of the same. So those are the sponsorship programs I would talk about. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
My apologies. Geetha, would you like to weigh in a little bit on that as well? You spoke about several factors that helped women, from your own personal experience as well, basically the women's rise to the top. But would you also like to weigh in on the role of allyship and sponsorship of facilitating that?
Absolutely, absolutely, Shachita. So personally, that has been so powerful for me in my case. So when I talk about allyship, it was a real tipping point in my career for me, to make that shift from a very senior finance leadership role to moving into a business leadership role, of 600 engineers and coming from a different background. So allyship by way of colleagues who were handling such businesses was humongous, and they were like massive support in terms of both encouraging me to say that you shouldn't overcomplicate it. All you need to know is how do we navigate these challenges, how do you understand the business, work with stakeholders on either side, and then you basically, it's all about communicating and stakeholder management. So really they simplified it for me, and they also provided me the right platforms where they would say that yeah, so Geetha is our joining this group, and she's going to be leading this team, and she comes with all of these positives and so on and so forth. So huge morale booster for me and support. But also from a manager's standpoint, he was a huge sponsor. So as a person who completely sort of knew what my strengths were and what my potential was, he was the one to actually take that leap of faith to say that she is going to be leading this business. And he did all the conversations with our senior stakeholders and our central offices at the group level to say that the business will be in safe hands and we will move it to Geetha. So I think when somebody goes the extra mile and really walks the talk in being a sponsor, then it makes a huge difference. But also touching upon this allyship, I think Shuchita, is we've got to celebrate allies a bit boldly, I think, in organizations. And I see we have a lot of programs, we celebrate women achievers and all of that, but also allies who are huge, I would say, force to reckon with in making this really come to life. I think we should create a platform where we bring them in front, celebrate, show them as role models for others to emulate. Because I think we need more of these people. We still have to work through the ranks when you talk about, opening up the minds of people, and the unconscious bias that Arti was alluding to is still there. It's a long journey ahead. And in some industries, it has happened much sooner than it has happened in other industries. So in hardcore engineering, I think, there's still some way to go. But absolutely coming back to your point, that is, absolutely non-negotiable. We need to have strong allyship and sponsorship for women to actually reach those levels of leadership that we're talking
Right,
about.
right. Fantastic. I think that was a really, really insightful discourse. Thank you so much, Geetha, for that. We've spoken about a lot of things. We've spoken about talent pipelines, how you get them moving. We've spoken about unconscious biases. We've heard about your journeys, your own personal journeys, which finally brings me to this last question for today's panel discussion, which is open to all our panelists today. What do you think are some of the leadership competencies and traits that women can aspire to develop for the rise to the top? Yeah. Sonali, would you like to start? Would you like to take a
Yes.
stab at that first? Yeah.
Yes. So, Sujita, first things I feel that for women to develop the leadership competencies and looking at opportunities which are going to be next level, it is first very important to start raising hands for challenging assignments and not being volunteer that would you be a scribe or would you really want to take this up? No, I'm very consciously saying that raising the hands for challenging assignments, which will be their leap forward towards the next level in their career. So do not shy away from taking those assignments which look challenging, because that will bring visibility for you. And that
Right.
will
So
also help build that competencies.
right. So that's a great point. Volunteer for challenging assignments to start with first. Would you like to talk a little bit about this, Rajita? Because I remember, earlier you spoke about a study that you did, which was across industries, and maybe you could allude a little bit to that study as well on leadership competencies that women can aspire to develop.
Thanks, Rajita. I think the research says the very obvious, but it says the very obvious in your face, and it is hard. The way organizations are structured are very masculine in nature. So everything that's done around is very patriarchal. So when you want women leaders to come in, your policies, your systems, your procedures, everything has to have, those kind of qualities and characters. When we did the study on leaders, about 25 or 30 of them, what came out very commonly is that their definition of a leader is somebody who's aggressive, somebody who's assertive, somebody, even if he doesn't know or she doesn't know her subject, is standing with conviction in front of you to give you the trust and faith that you are following a leader who knows his stuff or her stuff. So these were some very common things that came out. What was also fascinating is the queen bee syndrome. They said that this is like the queen bees and this is how women leaders need to behave. That said, it brought out, three aspects to it, which I want to call out specifically. While you said, behaviors, I want to say what impacts behaviors. One is perception management. Women are not great at, about how they handle their perception management, because many a times there's this belief, right? And we were also taught like this: karam kar, phal ki ichha mat kar. Don't care about what's going to come to you. But the fact of the matter is, people are still perceiving and basing their judgments on who you are and how you are, depending on that. So that's a challenge. So that's where women leaders need to understand to what extent am I going to take it? Am I going to take it or am I going to leave it? The second is, character of women leaders. So that was highlighted as part of the study, and I want to call out, 5 of them over here which came out. It indirectly impacts qualities of behaviors, which talks of having this zest, empowering action. Many a times, and I'll give you a very bad example, when our mothers are used to doing everything on their own, the minute you say that, you're growing old, get some domestic help at home, they're like, no, beta, I don't want it. But when you get it, they'll say, Acha, tum yahan khade ho, I'll do it and show it to you. So at the end of it, they can't empower that little bit of action as well because they want to do it themselves. And this is natural, right? I'm not critiquing, I'm just saying the facts the way it is. Then the other thing is you need to have an increased sense of worth. Many a times there's so much of self-doubt that you don't really know what you want to do. So as women leaders, when people are perceiving you, they are also looking at this aspect of it. New knowledge, we great at understanding and comprehending, but when it comes to articulation, at times we get a little stuck. When I think Arti moved from Kashmir to Chennai, There were all sorts of things coming in. But then how do you actually capitalize on what you've learned, and how do you project it for the future? And desire for more to come, and more to connect. What I mean by that is, and housewives do this brilliantly well, and I'm openly being very straight on that. The kitty parties they have, the amount of network they have. I don't know what happens to us when we get into the corporate world. Yeah? We refuse to talk to each other. We refuse to help each other. And then we're like, no, I'm at this level. My company said this. So what? Make a nice network for yourself. At the end of the day, we're here to help each other. And that's what really makes the difference. And lastly, the ecosystem. I mentioned corporate hypocrisy to you, Suchita. I'm going to call it out. And this was, a part of that. I will say all the good things. I have great policies, okay? But when it comes to implementation of that, I am not going to walk the talk, because there is going to be something or the other that's going to come. We all spoke of having allies, having sponsors. I can very openly tell you, I have great sponsorship and allyship at this company. This is my first company in 22 years. But still, when there are certain things that come, they say, Rajita, we want to protect you. And I'm like, don't protect me. I know how to protect myself. Just let me take on this responsibility and move on. So these are things that make a lot of difference. And I'll give you a very, simple example again. My dad got me into car racing when nobody even thought that girls can do car racing in the south of India. Okay, and then when I grew up to become the state champion, then everybody said, oh yeah, this is possible. That's where your ecosystem needs to be there. Otherwise, my grandma, my dadi said, what are you doing? You're creating a monster of a girl. Well, he did, but a very good monster is what I would say.
All right, thank you so much. That was a very, very interesting insights from the research study that you alluded to. Geetha, would you like to weigh in on some of the leadership behaviors that that Rajita and Sonali have spoken about?
Yeah, brilliant points, both Sonali and Rajita talked about. But I would like to just add one more thing. This is what I've seen in maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 women, and that resonated with them, which is really wanting to be the best in everything. And even in some ways, Indra Nui mentioned this. I mean, there was a bit of debate about it, but she said you can't have it all, in a way where you don't want to do like 100% of everything all the time, because you've got to prioritize, right? And then you don't want to look back and regret that, oh, actually I should have done it differently. So I think definitely there is a bit of that behavior, Shushita, which is really recognizing that you need to prioritize at different points in life what you want to do, and then in such a way that you still get support and you balance it out and you realize your dreams.
Right. I think there was some absolute nuggets of wisdom, and a lot of things that we've heard. We've heard about the imposter syndrome. We've heard about not getting caught in the housekeeping track. Uh, this was a very interesting thing, Sonali, you brought up, because typically what would happen is, whenever we do celebrations in office, I saw, all the eyes would suddenly turn on to me to start cutting the cake, and irrespective of whose birthday it was. And once I learned about the housekeeping syndrome, I would pretend I was on a call and walk out of the room. So, slowly we found volunteers, and people started volunteering, and so I mean, that's obviously on a lighter note, but typically that's what happens. When we see women get a seat at the table, they somehow get into the trap of doing all these admin work. And once they do that, I think the expectation starts building also from the others in the room, who would have otherwise become your allies and supporters. So fantastic points there, everybody. Arti, before we wrap this up, would you like to speak a little bit about the leadership behaviors? I think there's some really, really interesting insights that have been shared so far, but is there anything that you would like to add on?
I think these are the fantastic points what everybody has shared, but I would like to end the discussion with 2 points. One is take ownership of yourself. And that is the best thing. Like what you said, if all eyes would be on you to cut the cake, but you took charge of yourself and started doing whatever you found fit for that moment. And that changed the whole thing. That's exactly what we have to identify. Who am I? Right? It's very important to understand who am I, and then take charge of your own self. Last, I would like to leave with the quote, winners never quit and quitters never win. So that is the attitude we need to build. Halfway through, I cannot quit. if I have decided based weighing a lot of options. So I cannot quit. So that is the attitude one has to have. Leadership would follow.
Right. So thank you very much. I think this was a
You're
very,
on
very.
mute, Suchita.
Oh, okay. I have just unmuted myself. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so I think that was a very, very interesting panel discussions. Lots of nuggets of wisdom, from your own personal experiences of what you do in your organizations, and I'm sure there's been a lot of takeaways. Ujjwala, back to you. Are there any questions that we have for the panel before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, so like we said in the previous session also, I think this group of participants is very engaged with what we're talking about. So they're actually understanding that the questions that they're posting are already being answered, like as they post the question, the answers are coming out anyways. So I think the idea of having women in leadership roles to be called no longer women leaders, but just leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just stop labeling them as women leaders. I think that's when the whole gender aspect comes along. So I think fantastic discussion. Thank you so much for moderating this with just as much ease as it would take, like a group of people sitting around a table and discussing a very pertinent topic. Thank you very much indeed. I hope you all enjoyed, taking this session, because you're also in these roles, and you would have come across several of these challenges. So thank you to the participants as well for being so engaging